Listen,
Never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
we talk about it every day.
Can't get enough baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to weigh mine for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
All right, there's nobody I'd rather be talking to right now than Jared Porter. I haven't talked to Jared in a long, long time. No, really, nobody's talked to Jared in a long, long time. Jared, how are you?
I'm great. How you doing, Rob? Thanks for having me on.
Good. So Jared Porter was the general manager for the New York Mets for not a long time, but he was a general manager of the New York Mets. Before that, I got to know Jared through his time with the Red Sox, goes to the Cubs, goes to the Diamondbacks, and then again hired for the Mets. And as we point out, Jared, we haven't had a discussion with you publicly in a long, long time. And I'm glad we are. We're going to get to a lot of stuff. But first, I sort of want to set the scene in terms of why we haven't talked to you in a long, long time, and just sort of leading up to your time with the Mets, your dismissal from the Mets, and then where you have gone from there. The dismissal from the Mets, and please, and you said, I really appreciate you coming on and being an open book about this, is that it stemmed from an article that came out in ESPN.com detailing an inappropriate relationship involving a reporter. And then really it was, again, the article detailed that. The article was by Jeff Pass and Mina Kimes. And so you went from, and that happened, and correct me if I'm wrong, that happened, that incident that we're talking about was 4 years prior you taking the job with the Mets, right?
Yeah, I think about 4 years prior, maybe a little more.
4 years. And then, like you said, you went to the Diamondbacks and were part of their front office. And then you get hired by the Mets, and the article comes out and you let go. So before we get to sort of your path since then, which is going to be a big part of this, because everybody has a path and everybody has ups and downs and everything else. And I think that one of the things that you coming on here is a big part of the conversation is taking accountability. When that article came out, what was I guess the easiest way to say is, what was your thoughts? What was your immediate thought when that article came out?
Well, before I address that quickly, I just want to make sure that I'm very clear that, I'm speaking about this from a complete level of accountability for what I did. It was an inappropriate relationship for a lot of reasons, both for me personally, and also, of course, with the reporter. So I want to be very accountable about that as I talk through it. But yeah, when the article first came out, it's crazy, just a tremendous amount of fear, shame. There are some people that I reached out to. Obviously, I talked with my wife, my family, and my coworkers at the time at the Mets about the situation. But yeah, it was obviously a really tough moment. But I like I said, like being accountable, like I put myself in that situation. I made the decision to send the text message that I sent, and I certainly shouldn't have done it. So I just want to make sure that, I speak about this from a total accountability standpoint.
So, and I appreciate that. And, I think a lot of people, like you said, Jared, we haven't heard from you, man. We haven't heard from you. And at some point we have to continue the conversation, and that continue any conversation, especially tough ones, begin with accountability. And like you said, and a lot of people aren't going to be appeased by it. They're going to be like, how that works. That's fair. I mean, it's what it is. But to go back to the question, it's like when you just detailed some of it, when the article comes out, and in your mind, does the human nature take over where, how can I guess, keep my job? It
didn't really come to me like that. It became such a personal situation for me, really quickly. So that the job thing was really secondary. Look, I was really enjoying my time at the Mets, working with Sandy and Steve and the group they'd put together. They gave me the opportunity to be a general manager, which was an incredible opportunity. And look, they had to make the best decision for the New York Mets when the article came out, and I knew they would. I hold zero ill will towards them whatsoever. I do think they made the best decision for the Mets. It's unfortunate that I put myself and put them in that situation. But no, I didn't really go into job preservation mode. It all happened so quickly, Rob. Like, the article came out. I got word of the article, I think at like 3 or 4 p.m. that day. The article came for the first time. The article came out at 10 or 11 p.m. that night. And I was, let go at 5 a.m. the next morning. And I wasn't in New York. Like this was still during COVID time. So I had barely spent any time in New York. I was there when we traded for Lindor. But I'd never even seen my office at Citi Field.
Really?
I actually, to this day, I've actually never met Steve Cohen in person because everything is done, at the time, everything was done over Zoom. It was still in high COVID time. So it was a unique situation for a lot of reasons, but no, I honestly I shifted from the professional to the personal almost immediately. And that was more important to me.
When does it hit? Like, obviously self-preservation is, you just said it becomes more of a personal thing than a professional thing right away. I mean, this is our lives, we care about the ones we care about the most. What was when that came out, was there that immediate feeling of was there the, how am I going to excuse my way out of this, or am I going to accept this right away? And I want to lead to this story. We're going to talk about mental health and the importance of that. And all of this I hope that a lot of this helps people. But what was that when you have something like that happen? What's that mindset?
Yeah, for me, I think it's different for everybody. I think as we've seen, in the world, for me, it was immediately like, how do I grow and get healthier and fix myself right away. Now, I think I had a couple of different options. One option was probably to kind of crawl into a hole and like never do anything and feel really sorry for myself. And who knows what would come from that, more fear, more shame. The other one was to actually, really get to work and try to grow. So almost immediately, I went to a place in Arizona called the Meadows, which is a great mental health institute. I went to their inpatient center for about a week. So I literally went from, trading for Francisco Lindor a few weeks earlier to being at an inpatient mental health institute where I wasn't allowed to have shoelaces in my shoes until I was deemed not to be a suicide threat. So it was real. Like, it was hitting me hard, So I was there for about a week, and then I transferred in Scottsdale, where I was living at the time. I was in Phoenix, Scottsdale. The Meadows has an intensive outpatient center, which is called an IOP. So I transferred to there and started going there 5 days a week for about 8 or 9 weeks straight, and it was great. So I learned so much about awareness, authenticity, childhood development. For me, I had such a total lack of vulnerability, which is our ability to kind of share our emotions and our feelings. I had huge emotional walls. I think I lacked some boundaries. So I did a lot of work around those things, kind of the core principles of mental health. And for me, relationship with self, which might sound simple, but it's something I had never really worked on. I'm someone, despite all the professional success that I was having and the great people I worked with, I had tremendous body image issues. I was really, really hard on myself. I had unrelenting standards for myself. I remember anytime I was like heavily involved in a free agent signing or a trade, if that player didn't perform well, I thought I was going to get fired. Like, I was really, really hard on myself. And then through all that stuff, I learned that I had some process or behavioral addictions. I was, addicted to my phone completely. Technology was a huge addiction for me. Addicted to work, and really addicted to seeking approval from other people. Whether it was body image related or it wasn't even always, could have been a man, it could have been a woman, but seeking approval from people, wanting to fit in, wanting to be liked. And unfortunately, without doing any work and kind of some of the issues I was going through, it led me to some inappropriate places where, I was living a lifestyle at times that are beneath my morals and values. And so although it was a really tough time when that happened, and again, I'm saying that from an fully accountability standpoint, I'm really grateful for all of it. It led me down a path of growth, of mental health growth, of personal growth, of relationship growth that I absolutely never would have had if this didn't happen to me. And I do think it took, probably for me at least, a major incident like this to kind of wake me up. So even though it was tough, I took it as an opportunity to grow, and I'm truly so grateful for that. I feel like I'm, the most balanced and healthy version of myself that I've ever been. And again, I don't think any of that would have happened if that article didn't come out. So,
and you've actually reached out to Mina and Jeff, right?
mm-hmm. A couple years ago, I think a year and a half ago, I just sent them a kind of a letter email, just really thanking them for saving my life. I know it does to some people that might not sound right, but for me, that's how I ultimately felt. I didn't feel like that right away, but after doing a lot of work and reflection, I gave them an update on kind of where I was at, and I just thanked them for saving my life and kind of starting and leading me down this path of growth that I would not have gone down if the article didn't come out.
So before I'm really interested when you after the incident, when you actually checked yourself in to those experiences and to those places, looking back, even before the article, in that time that had in that span, was there any sort of evolution where you were understanding that you were going down this path? Like sometimes, maybe not fully, not totally, like where you grabbed the hold of it and said, "I got to attack this." But was there any like, oh man, like this happened 4 years ago, or maybe 2 years ago, and maybe this was wrong, or maybe I'm not thinking right?
Well, there's like little moments, I think, when things come up, and again, I'm speaking for myself, where like you kind of catch yourself in a moment, and you're like, man, that probably isn't like the right thing to do. And but one thing I've learned through this, when it comes to addiction or mental health, like if you lack an awareness, you truly can't grow. You might improve for a couple weeks or a month, but until you truly have an awareness of something that you're powerless over, I believe it's nearly impossible to grow and understand it. So I really lacked an awareness. I think I was living a lifestyle where things were going so well professionally. However, with that came a lot of pressure and anxiety. A lot of stress. Again, like I say that from a grateful standpoint. I had tremendous opportunities with the Red Sox, Cubs, and the Diamondbacks and Mets that I'm forever grateful for. But no, I lacked an awareness, Rob. It just wasn't there.
Mm. So when you do check yourself in, was that on the behest of somebody else, or was that your idea, or how did that work?
Yeah. So, I don't want to mention too many names, but at the time, Ken Kendrick from the Diamondbacks, who I had just left a month earlier, and it was a really tough decision to leave. He's a great owner. Him, Derek Hall, Mike Hayes, and Amiel Torre, all those guys who Ken actually sent me a text message, and he just said, if there's anything we can do for you, from a mental health perspective to help you, please let us know. And I ended up speaking with the guy who was in charge of their EAP at the time, and he had a relationship with the Meadows because it's Arizona based, and he's the one that kind of directed me there after a few conversations and meetings.
So when you get there, what's the first thing that hit you? What's this? It's a process, and you just recited a lot of things that you learn over your time. But there must have been something like, wow, like this hit me like a ton of bricks out of the gate.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was like I'm by myself right now. I'm alone, but that's what I need to grow, if that makes sense. There was still so much fear, though. Like so much fear. Major League Baseball, the media, family. There was still so much shame that was setting in, and this is at a time when I had never really. I'm someone who didn't think I had fear. I'm someone who didn't really think I had shame. I had no awareness of those things, but all these kind of emotions are setting in. I remember one of the things I did there was some neurofeedback, which is, they hook you up to some brain things and they do some, which is great for anyone who's never done it. And I'm meeting with the guy and I'm doing the neurofeedback, and he says to me, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most, what do you think your anxiety levels are? And I said, I don't know, probably a 1. He's like, really? And I was like, yeah, probably a 1. He's like, okay. So he keeps doing the neurofeedback. And he's like, what do you think, now on a scale of 1 to 5? And I said, I don't know, probably a 1. And he goes, your anxiety is off the charts. And it's just something that I had never even thought about. It never even occurred to me. So this gave me an opportunity to dig deep and do that work. And it's work that I still do to this day. I still, meet individually with the therapist. I still have a weekly group therapy session. I still try to help as many people as I can, with their mental health. So, that was just a great start down a very impactful path for me. Of course, it came from an incident that was tough, that was hard. But I do think from tough things, from hard things, at least for me, that's the best opportunity to grow.
Does there come a time? Maybe it's like when you're isolation. Do you're dealing with your personal life, your family, and everything else. And then does there come a time during your isolation where the baseball side of it? And again, this is because Jared, I mean, you just said it. You're addicted to your phone. You're addicted to the job. Yeah. You're addicted to making good trades. All of this. This is your life. This is your identity for a lot of ways up until that point. Yeah. When does that creep in?
Yeah, I had good support from people in baseball behind the scenes that were reaching out to me and keeping in touch and making sure I was doing okay. So I really appreciated that, my closest kind of friends in the game. I think I still had some fear, with just Major League Baseball, what was going on, what was going to happen, because when you get fired like that, you have a contract. What happens next? What do you do? So I had to still work through a lot of those things. So I had fear over that. I think everybody's different. I read some people that say once their team gets eliminated from the postseason or at the end of the season, they can't watch the playoffs. And I've seen some people say, hey, when I got fired or whatever, got in trouble, I couldn't watch baseball for 2 or 3 years. That wasn't the case for me. And maybe it's because of the work that I started doing right away. But I continued to watch a lot of baseball. I still continue to love the game to this day. So that moment never fully set in for me. I just really tried to focus as much as I could on what I could control, as hard as that was. And that was growing and then, potentially pursuing some other opportunities as they came up.
So when does it, listen, with mental health, it's turning the corner isn't a good phrase, so I'm not going to use that. But when does it feel like there's an acceptance of, because that was another big part of it, right? There has to be the acceptance of it, which you clearly found. The acceptance and then the moving on. And then this is sort of how I want to sort of move on. This is the path I want. Instead of worrying about, am I going to get back into baseball again? What's my family going to think? What's my friends going to think? But okay, it's time to move on. When was that?
When I first went to the Meadows, someone there said, this process could take 2 years. And I was like, no way, that's crazy. 2 years, that's nuts. And, I think so early on, I certainly, like you said, I gained an awareness, an understanding. I think at the same time, though, I also thought maybe that I had things figured out. For those of you who don't know, my mom died in a car accident when I was 21 years old. I started to trace back to some deeper things when I was in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade about just my emotional walls, my lack of vulnerability, some of my seeking approval from others and body image issues. And so I kind of tied all those things together and thought, this is it. I figured it out. It's all kind of tied to those different things. And now that I understand that, I'm going to be good. And that wasn't true. About 5 or 6 months later, I kind of found myself, back at a coffee shop, Twitter searching my name or Googling my name to see, if there's any more negative comments or negative articles and who's saying. And
I can tell you that's not good.
No, it's not. But I shouldn't have been doing that. So I think that also kind of lit me up a little bit. And then I got back to doing even more hard work. I went away to a monastery actually on the border of Arizona and Mexico for about a week. with a group of guys and did some really deep work. It was awesome, really rewarding. I still speak to those guys weekly. My wife and I went to a couple different kind of mental wellness retreat centers. I think we went to two or three of them. Three of them. We did a really deep experience too in like the San Bernardino forest, like a really deep kind of vision quest type thing. That was awesome. And so I'd say, once all that stuff was over, once I had done all that, I think that was probably about a year and a half, almost 2 years from when the article came out. So it honestly took me that long before I felt like, okay, now I'm in a really good spot and I can really like kind of spearhead this growth, and I'm really shifting more and more out of recovery and more towards aggressive growth.
You had mentioned, like I said, when I say don't search yourself on Twitter, like that's for me, like everybody. I'm not talking about like
No,
everybody.
I know. Yeah.
Right. It's if you're in the waiting room at the doctor's office, don't do that. I mean, don't do it ever.
No,
Like just take it as it comes. But also, were you worried about like you said, your identity, your friend group, your peer group was baseball. This is baseball.
Mm-hmm.
This is why you got a GM job with the Mets. Were you worried about your perception among the baseball community? Because I would imagine, before you answer, I think that probably, to your point, Ken Kendrick and other people, you probably got a lot of support where that's the most meaningful support, right? That the people that you think, hey, I'm never going to hear from them again, and then boom. But were you worried about that element of it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I had a lot of fear over that because, again, like getting back to one of the kind of the pillars of my issues was, seeking approval and being liked by other people. So, in a way, in a crazy way, what I did, which led to the article, it really created my worst nightmare, where I was in a position where I had to worry about seeking that approval. So I had to do a lot of work around that, and I did a lot of work around that at the Meadows and afterwards. And it really all came down to my relationship that I have with myself, truly, and understanding that I can't control other people's feelings or thoughts. That's manipulation. That's unhealthy. And to be honest, like what other people think of me is none of my business. That's up to them. All I can control is who I am and what I do and how I show up. So, recovery can be selfish, but I think in a good way. You really have to work on your relationship with yourself because that's the only way you're going to show up as the best version of yourself for other people. So that's what I was, really did a lot of work on with some great therapists and some people I worked with.
So mental health is, and when you reached out and we talked about, Jason LaRock was on the podcast, who Jason from.
Yep.
You may have hired him. I don't even know. Like,
no, I didn't hire him, but I know him.
Right. He was.
I haven't spoken to him for a long time.
Yeah, but we talked a lot about mostly for involving for younger kids and the development of younger kids, and it got really a great reaction. And I'm glad that you got a chance to listen to it as well. He was you worked with him when he was the bullpen catcher of the Red Sox, but mental health is one of the things. One of the reminders from that podcast was what a powerful conversation this is in the sports world, of the baseball world, obviously in the bigger world, but what a powerful conversation. And in regards to the baseball world, how much more accepting it was. And this is why I'm glad we're talking now, because already a lot of stuff that you said, there's lessons to be learned. In the baseball world, like if there was the acceptance that there needed to be, and you're not making excuses, but even in the front offices at that time, there wasn't probably the acceptance of mental health than there is now. Or am I wrong? I mean, I just feel like baseball is embracing it more.
Yeah, totally. I think the whole world's embracing it more. The whole sport. I mean, you watch the Olympics, last year, you see it all over the place. So I don't. Yeah, there was certainly a much greater stigma attached to it years ago, in my opinion. It's still there, but I think it's improving.
So along those lines, and all the exercises and all the experiences that you've had since, and I had no idea about how much you've gone through in terms of the self-betterment. But what are some of the things that you think that we can do? Like, what is some of the things that you've taken away from your experiences? This is what it's all about, of passing it on and moving it forward. People can take it or not take it. But what are some of the things that you feel like we're really missing the boat? Like, not to keep talking, but when Jason was talking about vulnerability for young kids, right? For young kids, it's okay. It's okay to show your emotions. But for you, what are some of the things that you feel like, let's say for you would, if you had to get up in front of a baseball organization right now, this is some of the things that we should prioritize.
Yeah, I would say, again, like there's so many things I love about the baseball culture, and I haven't been in it for 4 years, so perhaps things have changed. But I would say balance is really important. Try to find balance. I do think that in probably any professional culture, even high school or college sports or whatever, there's certainly like a drive and that's created to kind of be accepted by other people and to be part of the group. If there's ever a way to kind of lessen that, I think the way through that is just through better communication. Through talking with people more, listening to people more. Giving people's authentic voices like an opportunity to speak, maybe rather than trying to control some of the narratives too much. But I really think the biggest one's probably balance. I mean, baseball, at least from what I see and hear when I talk to people now, it's so competitive, and there's just every team's looking for tiny little competitive advantages. So I'd imagine with that comes even more stress, more anxiety. So I hope that people are able to find balance through that. And then I think the other thing that just specifically that comes up for me a little bit is that we allow what puts weight on our shoulders, and I think a lot of like negative thought can put weight on people's shoulders. So one of the things I think happens in sports, at least because of the nature of it and how competitive it is you end up spending a lot of time almost rooting against things in a negative way. It might be a player that you traded away that you don't want to look bad, so you don't want that player to succeed, or a free agent you didn't sign that you didn't recommend, so you don't want that free agent to go succeed somewhere else because it makes you look bad. Or maybe a team that you're competing with that you're rooting against. I know part of that sports. I don't think the Red Sox want the Yankees to win, and vice versa. But I do think when there becomes a lot of that, it just adds a lot of negative weight to your shoulders, and that's absolutely something that came up for me. And I don't think that was just me. I think that was pretty common. So I would say I hope that's something that could change as well.
I mean, a lot of this stuff, Jared, is, I would imagine, as you get further away from that world, where you're in this washing machine for how many years? I mean, probably, when did you join the Red Sox?
I was an intern in 2004, so about 17, 18 years. Yeah.
Yeah, you get a ring. Do they give interns rings?
I got a watch. It's actually a funny story because some interns got rings, but talking about my mental health issues, all I wanted to do was be accepted. All I wanted to do was be a part of that group, was to get a full-time job, was to be a part of that Red Sox baseball operations group, and nothing would have stopped me from that. And so there's no way I was ever going to say, wait a second, I want a ring. Why do I get a watch? Because I just wanted acceptance. So it all worked out for me. I'm fortunate. I ended up getting 3 rings, 2 more with the Red Sox, 1 with the Cubs in 2016. But no, it actually, that's something I actually talked about at my therapy at times, because it was indicative of my mindset at the time, was seek acceptance, seek acceptance, seek acceptance.
And which leads me to my point. So in that 16 years, you're in this spin cycle of working for baseball, just thinking about the next big thing and looking for acceptance and all of that. That reality probably didn't hit you, right? Didn't hit you certainly when you were in baseball, right? It took that time away. There was probably a lot of things in the time away. You're looking back and go, wow, like I would never have identified that.
Yeah, there's just no awareness. Like I don't think I knew what the word vulnerability meant, to be honest with you, at the time. I didn't know, what true fear was. I didn't know the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is something that's good. Guilt means I made a mistake. I feel like I made a mistake. Shame is I'm a bad person, and that's bad. The difference between those things. There's a female author named Brene Brown, who I've
Yeah.
done a lot of reading and work around. She's excellent, and she talks a lot about vulnerability and shame and fear. And one of the things that she always says is, in our culture, there's, often associated with the fear and the shame and the uncertainty is negative associations, which is a problem, because those places are really where it's like the seat of joy and happiness. So it's like we're almost pushed in a way to avoid the things that can ultimately make us the most connected and the most happy. So yeah, those are things I look back on now, and this goes way farther back than my time in baseball. This goes, like I said, back to when I was probably in fifth, sixth grade. But yeah, I certainly lacked an awareness, and absolutely didn't have it when I was working in baseball.
So as we said, like, you really haven't done anything for the last 4.5 years. I'm not anything. I mean, anything media related.
Yeah,
Which you appreciate. And so I look at this as there's a lot of important conversations that we've had in this podcast. There's a lot of lessons to be learned. But now this is for you. I would hope is that this is sort of like, okay, you're moving forward with getting whatever message you want, and also doing something that's impactful to you. Like, it's like, to your point, I'm sure you've been doing stuff. I mean, other than, like, you're doing stuff, but stuff that, like, this is to move. There's steps to moving forward, right?
Yep.
So what's your next step for you obviously after we finish taping?
Yeah. So I've really dedicated so much of my time to mental health. With one of the therapists who I did a lot of work with, who has a lot of experience, as a former amateur athlete himself. We have kind of a boutique company that we started. We've worked with athletes in all the major sports besides the NFL. We're currently working with multiple athletes at the highest levels. A lot of college athletes, youth athletes, even some unique sports like rodeo and things like that. Just in some of it's reactive. So hey, there's a crisis and this person needs and wants help. Some of it's proactive, which is great. A lot of athletes now are seeking proactive growth and help, which has been really rewarding. And then tried to help as many of my family and friends as I can too. I feel like, with all the work that I've done, I've become a little bit of a sounding board for a lot of people, which is great, which I welcome. It's interesting. When I was working in baseball, I always felt like I was a very, giving person. And as I reflect, I was, but it was kind of materialistic. And I don't mean that in a malicious way at all, but I'd give someone a couple tickets to a game, or I'd give someone batting practice in the field passes, or a signed baseball bat, or a signed jersey or something, and I was never truly giving my time, and my focus. And now being able to give my time and give my focus has been incredibly rewarding. Service is so rewarding, something I never really understood and certainly took for granted for so many years. But yeah, so back to the mental health company. So we're in the process now. Hopefully in the next month or so, we'll be launching a marketing campaign with a website. And our real goal is to continue to serve those high-end, professional college athletes that need to do the work. But we're going to proactively go after the youth market and really try to create an awareness at the youth level, at the youngest levels of youth sports throughout the country. I go to my nieces and nephews, club soccer and hockey tournaments, and it's just an absolute pressure cooker there. You have all these kids that are great athletes, but they're just under so much pressure and so much stress. And I feel like at the highest levels of sports professionally, players, rightfully so, both men and women, now have probably more power than they've ever had. Their voices are heard so much more. And as a result, a lot of the coaches and managers, I think you had Tori on here recently. He's a great example of this. Their EQ is just so strong. They're such good listeners. They put their players and their athletes, they feel safe. They're in a good place to perform. They're authentic. They listen. As you get younger and younger and younger from the pros, that in my evaluation, that really oftentimes starts to disappear. And the coaches, although they're trying to do the best that they can, they really are controlling these kids' lives and from an emotional standpoint. So getting into these programs and these youth athletes and creating an awareness, creating an education at the large group scale level is what we're going to try to do. And then from that, we think we'll get quite a few athletes that are going to want to do individual work with us, and also small group therapy work. So that's something that I'm personally really excited about, because I think back to myself when I was doing, individual therapy, after my mom died. It was really tough for me to connect. It was really easy for me to kind of disassociate and not be vulnerable. I didn't know at the time, but when I went to the Meadows, I got into a small group setting, and when I was in the small group setting, it really allowed me to open up. And I felt like I was helping others; they were helping me, and it felt really, for me, it was a way to get my authentic voice out there. So we also want to provide that for the youth athletes, get them into some small group settings, perhaps not even with their peers or people that they're friends with, and get them talking. Everything's going to be therapist led. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think it's very needed. Yeah, hopefully it all works out.
Well, I mean, like you just said, I mean, you're accepting of that small group setting or that communication as a, an adult compared to an 11-year-old, or compared to when you were a younger man. It's just different. And as you point out, I do want it. So do you have the name of the organization that you guys are forming, or do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, it's called Blend. So we're basically blending mental health and mental performance. We feel that mental performance is great. Mental skills, I should say, not mental performance. Breathing exercises, visualizations, all that stuff is so important. We think those are great tools. But with all the work we've done, we feel like almost everything is actually rooted more in mental health. And I'm not talking about like clinical mental health, but things that we've talked about, like anxiety, like boundaries, like healthy communication, whatever it might be. It's more, we've talked to pitchers who, couldn't get focused on the mound. They were just so stressed out, and they were trying to do, and this is major league pitchers, they're trying to do visualizations or breathing exercises, which are great. I'm a huge proponent of those. But when we did work with them, we realized what was really bothering them. They couldn't get to that visualization. They couldn't get to that moment, the breath work, because they heard their father's voice in their head when they were a child on the mound, or their high school coaches in their head, and they couldn't snap out of it. So kind of figuring out, working with athletes to, so they can go back and kind of figure out what it is, like how do they create interdependence, and what maybe veered them off course at some point. So yeah, those are kind of some of the things we're going to be working on, but it's called Blend. We should be launching a website at some point here in the next month or so.
All right. Awesome. Here's a wonky question. I know that you like other sports. Congratulations. It's important to diversify. But you're an excellent hockey player of hockey background. I mean, I say you're an excellent hockey player. I take
the rumor. We'll keep it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. You like soccer, right? So,
Yep.
So when it comes to what you're talking about, which is, and we talked about it with Jason, and where, with the youth and communication and openness and all of that, and really just mental health for young people. When you look at now, you've been around these other sports, does one separate from the other, or do you feel like this is some sort of like a catch-all thing for everybody? In other words, because we know that AU can put pressure on kids. So this is a bigger conversation, but is there one sport that you've come across that is like, well, man, this could really, really use what we're talking about?
No, I think all of them. I really do, and I know that's the easy answer, but I do think that's the case because look, our goal. So I think 60% of the youth in America, maybe more than that, play organized sports outside of school. So that's a huge chunk of the youth population. That's why we're going to go after the youth athletics, and it's also because what we know, we're not going to limit ourselves to athletes, but we think it's a good way to enter the market. But our goal is, let's create an education and create an awareness for these kids. So when they get to a point in their life, whenever it is, it could be when they're 40, it could be when they're 15, when they get into a situation where they might, either physically or emotionally hurt themselves or hurt somebody else, they're able to kind of step back on what they've learned and find their pause. Because I think that's the big key when it comes to mental health or acting out or whatever you want to call it, is how do you find your pause? And without an awareness and without some education around it, if you start to go down that path, it's really tough to do. So that's really our goal. And I think that's for anybody, no matter what sport it is. I think that's for anybody, regardless of the sport.
So that's, I mean, again, I hope that people are listening, and we'll make sure that we get the word out, because it's really much like we had the conversation with Jason LaRock. I mean, it's such an important thing, the most important thing when we're talking about moving forward and educating these kids, and educating parents too. When's the last time you talked about the Francisco Lindor trade? Because
Well, I was pulling for him in the in the playoffs.
Yeah, what's that?
He
What's that
was
like for you? Because you did trade for Francisco Lindor, so like, what was that like for you?
It was great. It was great to watch him. I really truly try to live a judgment-free life right now. A life of forgiveness, self-forgiveness, which is really important. But also, forgiveness of others. And I sit there and watch Francisco Lindor, and I'm excited for him. I've always loved the way that guy's played, and seeing the energy at Citi Field for those games was great. And I have a lot of friends who work for the Dodgers, the Padres. So just seeing those teams have success was rewarding. And of course, last year watching the Diamondbacks go to the World Series was incredible for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, if Torrey just wore his baseballs and boring sticker in his hat for beyond Game 2, they would have won. Live and learn.
He's the best.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it. I meant it when I said it. It's you talked about being present with people, Torrey is the best at what it's just listening to what you're saying. Like it's as simple as that. Actually, being curious about what you're saying, which is, I think, such a rare thing.
I tell people this all the time about Torrey. He's the best listener I've ever been around, and I mean that with the utmost confidence. I mean a compliment, because listening is hard. It's hard for me. It's not easy, and I have an awareness of it. But Torrey's an incredible listener, and he's just really good at connecting with people. He's authentic and he's vulnerable. And I think, you and I talked about a little bit before when it comes to the authenticity and the vulnerability. We used to sit there in the draft room all the time and how do we find the next like Dustin Pedroia makeup or Mookie Betts makeup or David Ortiz? I mean, go down the list. You get John Lester, John Lackey, Josh Beckett, these JD Martinez in Arizona, these guys that just had this kind of winning edge to them. And, we always kind of look for clones. And as I've stepped away the last 3 or 4 years, I've done a lot of work around that. And I think what all those guys share is that they're authentic. They're really authentic and they're vulnerable. They're open with their feelings and emotions. And I think people really react strongly in a positive way to authenticity and vulnerability. And I think that's true leadership, being able to do that.
Well, I appreciate you being authentic and open. I know that taking this step was probably not easy, right? Not easy.
It's been a lot of work, but I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, and listen, I mean, you get a baseballs and boring T-shirt. Let's go.
Oh, nice. Sweet.
But thank you so much. A lot of powerful stuff. I thank you so much, Jared. It's always good catching up with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Take care.